Within marketing, we do cover the laws that affect marketers. You'll cover it in greater detail when you take business law, but we do a cursory discussion of the laws that are specifically impacting us within marketing. The second one that's listed here, the Robinson-Patman Act, that's probably the one that you might hear the most. It was in 1936. It was really prohibiting firms from selling the same product at a different price in interstate commerce based upon cost difference of the goods if they're not similar or equal quality. What this means is that you can't sell the exact same product but then have it be sold at a different price if there's not a reason for it. Now, if there's a reason, anybody who's ever been to Alaska and looked at the prices of products there, you'll say, well, prices in Alaska and Hawaii cost a whole lot more than they do in another state. The reason is that there's transportation cost involved. So that's okay. You're allowed to do that. You just can't change prices based upon, you could say in the South they don't have as much money as they do, and so we're going to charge different prices. There has to be a reason for that. The other act that was probably the most common within marketing is the first one that's listed. That's the Sherman Antitrust Act. This says that we can't have those anti-competitive practices. We can't have one corporation trying to dominate the marketplace and really push everybody else out of business. Typically, we see that either by buying up all the other businesses or they keep their prices so low that they force everyone out. And you may say, well, I've seen that happen with a local Walmart in my area. Well, they're not doing that. They're not doing by the true intent of the Sherman Antitrust Act. They might make it difficult for small retailers to compete, but they're not necessarily intentionally forcing them out of business. And what you'll find is in some of these laws that it's the intent that has to be proven in a court of law. And again, all of these have to be proven in a court of law. When you look at the Wheeler-Lee Amendment, this gives the Federal Trade Commission the ability to restrict unfair or deceptive trade practices. You'll see this sometimes called the Advertising Act. This says that consumers have to be protected from false advertising claims. Now, you may say, well, I've bought a lot of products that I've seen on social media or I've seen in an infomercial, and they didn't quite work like they said. Well, it's actually the legitimate claims that they make, especially when you're having to do with medical products, other types of products that could be harmful. It just is a layer of protection for consumers. We do also use the Fair Packaging and Labeling Act. This really says that we have to start labeling what the product is. The interesting thing is that, this is fairly recent, 1966, but it says that you have to say what the name of the business is, where it's located, where it's manufactured, and what the quantity of ingredient contents are. You're going to start to see that there's other legislation that is now starting to look at calorie count and fat grams and all kinds of other things. That's newer guidelines that are being encouraged, not necessarily mandated everywhere. The Telephone Consumer Protection Act says that as far as dealing with telephone solicitation, you can only call between certain times. One thing that you're starting to find is because there's a do not call list, this is not quite as important. It does protect consumers that if they sign up on a do not call list, that there's a fine, a penalty that businesses have to pay if a business is not honoring that do not call list. Or if you are called and you request to not be called again, actually they're not permitted to call you. Again, it's all about enforceability. It can be difficult for a consumer, but the law is there for the consumer's protection. There's also a credit card accountability and responsibility and disclosure. If you've ever looked at a credit card statement, you'll see that it's still a couple pages long and very fine print. That is basically to try to give the consumers, to show them their rights, and it starts to abolish those deceptive lending practices that some of the credit card companies in particular were known to do to consumers.